Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jake. Welcome to another episode of The Success Shift. We are back for the start of a new week. What a wonderful week it is, too. The sun is out in Germany, and this is a beautiful, beautiful sign. It's been a while since I've actually got to embrace some of the sun, and I was standing out at work today with my fingertips frozen off, and then right around the corner of the building, this sun came beaming down on me, and I was bloody stoked, to be honest. I love the sun, and you don't realize how much you love it until it's gone. So my gratitude comes from the beautiful vitamin D that I was absorbing from the sun. It also gives me a bit of a reminder, not to take things for granted because, like I said, we don't realize how much we miss something until it's gone. And now for me, at the moment, this was the sun. But if we don't find gratitude for the people we love, we don't treat people with respect, we don't find gratitude for the things that we do have, and we start to ignore the luxuries or the little things that make us happy, we will soon start to lose them. So finding gratitude for the things we do have, extremely important, and making sure that we find gratitude for those things and people and let them know about it before it's too late and before they are gone. Yes, it was very, very nice to see the sun. So I'm in a great mood. Like I said, vitamin D, bit of sunshine, all smiles. So I'm just looking through the chat here. Drop your gratitude into the chat. Happy Tuesday, Jake and friends. Happy Tuesday. Grateful for this morning. Grateful this morning for resilience. Resilience. That's a good one. I hope you're still managing to get your exercise in. I know for me, I have made it a routine of discipline so that every day this year I am running 1 kilometer, and it was minimum 10 push-ups, but I'm also doing a 100 push-up a day challenge. So my minimum is 10 push-ups and 1K, but I'm actually doing 100 push-ups a day. But I tell you what, the last couple of days have been a struggle. I find that in myself, I often have motivation and I go strong for 2, 3, 4. This has almost been 5 weeks now. And it's fine. And then you kind of hit this wall, okay, the old habits start to creep back in, the motivation starts to dwindle. You realize that, oh, is it going to be worth it? Maybe the results that you're expecting in this short period of time haven't been exactly, they haven't come as you were hoping for. I know that I was going to do a picture each month, and I felt like I looked bigger in the second picture than the first picture, which is always a bit disheartening. But it's these moments where we have to find that extra bit of motivation. It's these moments where we have to remember that we are here to be finite, infinite players, not finite players, that we're here for the long run, that consistency is what pays off over time, and that we can't get disgruntled by the expectations we had for a really short period of time. I think Tony Robbins says the quote, people overestimate what they can do in 10 days, but underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Overestimate what you can do in a week and underestimate what you can do in a year, something along those lines. So we have to find extra motivation in these moments. So these times where it's like, it's getting hard. My old self wants to fight back. My body and my mindset has gone, this new version of Jake's effort. I don't know if I want it. Let's go back to the old Jake that was lazy and overweight. It was much easier to manage that Jake. And this is where you have to find it inside you and find the mental strength and capacity to go, no, I'm not going to let my old habits, my old gremlins and goblins creep back in and take over. I'm going to continue. I'm going to keep pushing and can stay consistent. So finding resilience is very important. I don't know if that gratitude came from a place similar to where I'm trying to find resilience and more motivation, but it is a matter of, for me, realizing that if you want to do something great, you have to make changes and do things that others aren't doing. And old me was not consistent and disciplined and stuck with things. Old me gave up when it got too hard. And that's why during these moments, and like this week especially, it's like find that strength, find that grit, find that resilience, and keep going. So I hope that if it's something along those lines, similar lines, you're able to keep going and keep pushing. I'm grateful this morning for new beginnings, new week, new thoughts, new outlook. I too am grateful for the peak of sun that we had yesterday and hoping it appears again today. Very nice. New beginnings, new week, new thoughts, new outlook. I love that. It's a good combination, actually. Be interesting to see if you're willing to share what thoughts provide what outlook. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it's always interesting to see how other people's perspectives are shifting. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday from Tom Bilyeu, speaking about frame of reference, also referred to as point of view, or just went completely blank. Perspective. There we go. Wow, my brain just shut off then. About perspective as well, and how important it is, and how a lot of the time frustration, anger, a bunch of these emotions come from having an inability to look at all the information and find perspective from the other point of view or the other person's side, or having a frame of reference that allows you to understand more of the situation that's not biased to where you are, which I thought was very, very interesting. And it runs true with a lot of the stuff that we talk about here on this show. I'm grateful for stoic leaders whose timeless strategies give me a great roadmap to follow. Yeah, I was reading, I think it's The Daily Stoic. It's a great book that I had when I was traveling. Unfortunately, it was a bit too big for me to carry around for some of my travels. So I had it for a while, and I'd read, you'll open it up and you've got like the one little thing per day, and there's like one for each day. And I found that was a really good book. So, and I don't know if you've read that book or if you're reading that book, but if you like the Stoic leaders and their teachings, then I'd definitely look at checking that book out. I think it's called The Daily Stoic. All right. Today, I want to talk a bit more about identity. I know we've spoke about this a little bit in the past. I think it's extremely important, but I want to dive into it a little bit deeper today. And I want to split it up into two different categories. So what my intention here is that you actually start to dive a little bit deeper. Now, I'm not sure if anyone who's listening to this podcast or anyone who's on the call right now has done any exercises surrounding identity and trying to figure out exactly who you want to identify as, because I think that this can be very powerful. Again, I was listening to a podcast that, now I'm not going to be able to get this quote, but basically the synopsis of it was that certain activities help us to uncover certain areas of our brain and our behaviors and our being. And what the one that I'm referring to is journaling helps us to uncover our subconscious, and writing helps to dig a little bit deeper into our subconscious. I wish I could remember the rest of the quote, but I can't. So what I'm suggesting here is that sometimes we might have these discussions, and sometimes you might listen to podcasts and listen or read books, watch YouTube videos, and they discuss certain topics, but that's where you stop. However, what I would recommend is that if you really, really want to understand yourself, take the time to go and do the exercises that people talk about. Take the time to go and delve a little bit deeper. And sometimes, for this example, if I say, do you know who you identify as? And you might have it in the back of your mind and go, yes, I do. I've got an idea. But then when you go and actually write down exactly who you identify as, you'll actually start to see, I didn't realize that was exactly how I identify as, or that's how I believe people perceive me. And then you might actually start to realize that, hang on, if this is how I identify, is this really how I want to be identified? Is this the person I want to be identified as? And so what I would recommend to everyone here and listening on the podcast is to write down a bunch of your own identities. Now, you don't have to have just one identity. There's lots of people who have multiple identities, and they have different facets of their life that they like to show off in different areas. I know there's lots of traders who are also identify as a mother or a father, parents who identify as whatever their profession is. There could be professional lawyers who identify as a basketball player. I know that just recently I read a article about a teacher who was an OnlyFans model, and then one of the mothers or whatever came out and pulled him into the spotlight, and they got in a bunch of trouble and blah, 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 blah. So lots of people have multiple identities, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I want you to establish what your identities are. You might identify as a mother, as well as the partier on the weekends who's a great person to be around. And so I want you to try to create a list of these identities, however many it is that you would like. I identify as a trader, identify as a young, fun parent, new parent, might I add, because it's a learning curve. I also like to identify as an inspiration to others and a motivator and a wow, that's ironic, a speaker, a public speaker. Yeah, irony that I went blank exactly as I was trying to say that I'm a good public speaker. So I identify in a few different categories as well. And what I would like you to do once you've got this list of identities is I want you to just break them up into two categories. One being imposed and one being intentional. Because I feel that a lot of people in society and a lot of people that you might know in maybe a not so happy environment have a very imposed identity. It's something that they have just let life mold them into. So there is this identity that you have that, now I'm not saying everyone has an imposed identity, but a lot of us have an identity that we have that has just come about by the choices that we've made and the way that life has thrown us, whatever it's thrown us, and we've just let happen. Now, you might be happy with these identities, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I identify as a traveler because those are the decisions that I made. I chose to go traveling. I chose to do certain things, and it just so happened to be that as the years continued and I didn't really return home, I became a traveler. So I identify as a traveler. So this was it was intentional as well as imposed. So it's probably not the best example, but you might be let's say you're a teacher. I don't know why I'm using teachers today, but they're on the top of my mind. Let's say you're a teacher, but you never really wanted to be a teacher, but your parents wanted you to be a teacher. So you went to school, you did the university thing, you wound up as a teacher. Now, this is something that you might not be happy with, but you identify as being a teacher, but it's imposed by maybe your parents, imposed by society, imposed by, I don't know, maybe the environment that you live in, needing a certain wage. So you're doing it because of the money rather than the joy. Mind you, most teachers don't choose it because of the money. But you get my point, right? So if anyone in the chat is willing to share, chuck in some ones in the chat if it's making sense, and maybe chuck in a couple of identities that you have that may be imposed if you are willing to share, if any that you can think of. I have been identified as a caregiver, which at times I feel takes away from me and who I am. Yeah, see, there you go. So this is this is a perfect example. Now, I know lots of caregivers have the biggest hearts in the world, and lots of them sometimes start that way because that's the way they want to perceive, but sometimes it can take away from all the other aspects of their life, as you have just said. Now, this can be an imposed identity because it's something that maybe you started to decide you wanted to do, but then just through life, it's become a big part of you that now takes away from who you are. So this is an identity that's not actually intentional anymore. It's now become imposed. So that's a perfect example. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else have anything in there that they might want to share? Okay, so what I want to do now is look to the other side of things, and you can look for your intentional identities. And I think a lot of the time, people who have just let life take hold and send them in a direction, they don't have too many intentional identities. They might have some, like if you've gone down and you really wanted to be, because I did engineering, if you really wanted to be an engineer, you might identify as an engineer, and it's something that you're very proud of, and that's an intentional identity. I started doing that because of it was the good way to make a living. It was, what I should be doing with my grades, and it was the thing I should be doing to get money so that I live a good life. It was all this shoulds. So society kind of imposed that on me. So there's this differential. Trading, 100% something that I have chosen intentionally. This is something that I continue to go back to, that I spend a lot of my spare time trying to perfect, trying to get better at, trying to understand, because it's an intentional identity. And the thing is, I think a lot of people who are maybe on this journey, they might be doing what I'm doing right now, but not identify as a trader. So these are the two things that I really want you to take note of when you're doing this. What are the things in your life that you're intentionally doing, that you're trying to bring forward? Usually a dream, a goal, a bigger achievement that you haven't identified as yet. You're just kind of like, I'm a caregiver who trades. You're choosing the imposed identity over your intentional identity because you don't identify with the thing that you're intentionally doing yet. You're just allowing the imposed identity take control. Like I said, there's no good or bad to this. It's just really important to bring awareness to the two, because I think when we really want to take control of our own lives, we have to see what we are holding on to. Because once you have an identity, what comes along with that identity becomes certain values, certain behaviors, certain characteristics that you kind of take on that are connected to that identity. Now you just think, what do caregivers do? And you just automatically think they're very nice. They care for people. They're always looking out for others. Sometimes it's not the best pay. Sometimes they work really long hours. Sometimes, they're put in hard situations and they have to take moral decisions over themselves, etc., etc. Another one I hated was single mum. Yeah, single mum's another really good imposed identity. Now, I'm assuming a lot of the single mums out there, not all of them, but a lot of them didn't choose to be single mums. Just life happens and that's the way they ended up. And so this does get imposed on us as the identity that we can take. But what I want to try and get you to do is list the imposed identities, list the intentional identities, and if you've got things in your life that you're striving for that you don't identify as yet, put them in the intentional identity list and start identifying as that. Start intentionally changing who people see you as, from that single mother to, an incredible trader who also has children. No one really gives a shit about the partner situation anymore because they see you as the trader who's a great mother, single or partnered. You see, you need to start understanding these identities that we have and then trying to choose which ones we want to identify as. And you can shift your perspective on your life at any point in time by completely absorbing a different identity. I'm sure you've heard things like identity crisis and identity shifts, and midlife crisis from men often come from having a confusion in their identity where they've just let society take hold and move them in a certain direction to become this ideal man person that needs to be, when really they realize, holy shit, I wanted to be a drag queen and, I don't know, run around in heels. Who knows? But these midlife crises come from identity crisis often, where they've been led down one track and really they want to be completely in the opposite direction. What does my life come to? Is this really who I want to be? These sort of comments, these sayings, these lines that people say to themselves, I think comes from not realizing their intentional identity compared to their imposed identity. I know a lot of people around my age group definitely got taught that university was the way to go, that you've got to come down to this career so that you can have this. Thank you, families. Thank you, society. This is the imposed identity that I've now become a insert degree-based job here. Chuck some ones in the chat if this is making sense to you at all. Okay, cool. We got a little bit of understanding. Chuck some twos if you need me to explain it more, and it is confusing still, because it is a confusing concept. Okay, we got some understanding. Sometimes what is imposed has a fragment that we draw out and evolve into a more intentional part of our identity. 100%. I totally agree with you, Anna, there. And it's not black and white. It's not one or the other. They're definitely interlocked. And exactly as you've just said, sometimes what is imposed has a fragment that we draw out and evolve into a more intentional part of our identity. It's perfectly said, because what we do often when we have an imposed identity, it's because we have some form of intention behind it. I'm not going to, for example, I don't know, I was horrible at history and wasn't really interested in politics. So I'm not going to really be imposed to be, let's say, a political leader, because that's got zero interest in me. I liked playing with robots. I liked numbers. And so the imposed engineering identity was there because of my intentional choices to play with robots and pick out numbers and have fun with those things. So there's definitely a connection between the two. And often, if you have a strong enough willpower and drive and desire, and you know yourself enough, the imposed identity can sometimes lead you on a path where you find other opportunities and you jump at them, and that becomes your intentional identity. And like I said, you can have more than one. You don't have to just be one thing. You can be a great trader who's great at public speaking and is a great dad. Hopefully talking about myself right now. You know, can have multiple identities, but are they intentional or are they imposed? Are you living a life that someone else has designed, or are you living a life that you have created and designed? Identifying as the person you want to be seen as, and identifying as those identities which you have intentionally tried to impose upon yourself. That's a bad way to put it. Intentionally try to bring to yourself. Okay, so I want you to do the exercise, write it down. You know, we've had in the chat caregiver, single mom. These are identities that you may have that are imposed that you don't want anymore. And that's more than okay as well. And if you don't want those identities, create a new one. Create something that you can run with. Create something that you can say to people. Oh, what do? I'm a trader. I love public speaking and I run a podcast because I like sharing information with people. Straight away, my identity is all things that I have chosen and that intentionally have put out there as the person I want to be. Yeah, okay, I also do XYZ, but that's a thing on the side that may be imposed that you might be trying to remove from your identity, or something that you do on the side that is just a fun little thing. Like, okay, I play guitar. I'm not saying I'm a musician. I'm not saying that's how I'm going to make my money. It's how I keep my brain going and entertain my son when he's crying, but it's not who I identify as. You know, you can have other hobbies and things that you don't identify as, but this is the key, is making sure that those things and those traits and those dreams that you have align with who you identify as. And make sure they're intentional, that you have put them there, and that you're not trying to follow the dream of someone else, and that it's imposed by somebody telling you, you should be doing this in your life, you should be doing this in your life. And then you're like, hey, I'm the exact person that my father told me to be, and this is who I am now. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. If you wanted to follow what your father told you and become a lawyer, doctor, engineer, or all those very family-based driven degrees, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're happy. And that's the key aspect. Are you happy? And do you like the identities you have about yourself? Okay. I hope that makes sense. I really encourage you to do the exercise and learn more about yourself by writing it down. Because once you start writing, then it starts flowing. That's when the motivation comes, and it unravels itself. It's crazy when you actually start doing it. Sit down with a pen, paper, start writing. I've got no idea what I'm going to write. Okay, identity one, and then it flows, and then ideas come, and then you start to realize, holy shit, these are all the things that are imposed. These are all the things intentional. And I'm not even identifying as these things just yet. I need to start identifying as these characteristics on my intentional list right away, and just see what happens to your life, because the characteristics, the behaviors, the values, everything else that you have that will come along with that change in identity will hopefully be the catalyst that fires you to the next level of success, to that next level of identity, and becoming the person that you really want to become. Okay. Thank you, Jake. This gives me something to chew on today. I hadn't considered this before. Yeah. And it's sometimes you don't have any idea about thinking about doing it until someone mentions it. I'm glad you got something to do. Enjoy. I would love to hear any results that come out. You're more than welcome to share on our next session, or you can message me privately and we can go through stuff, because I do really want to see the change and the growth and the differences that hopefully these lessons are making. All right, we have a couple minutes. Give yourself time to go through your trading plan. For our traders, we'll jump on the trading call now. Go through your trading plan, go through your objectives, go through your rules, make sure that you're in a good state of mind, read your affirmations, get yourself in the correct zone, correct frame, and let's go crush the charts. To everyone listening on the podcast, I will see you on the next episode on Thursday. And yeah, bye for now. Love you all.